This time it's our 1954 BSA Golden Flash. Now before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Introduced in 1950, the Gold Flash is generally attributed to Burt Hopwood, although much of the design is in fact based very closely on the earlier A7 parallel twin. Much of the design work of that was done by Val Page. Page is usually associated with Ariel, but in the mid-30s he moved to Triumph, where he developed the 6-1. This was the first parallel twin built by Triumph, predating the Speed Twin. And it was that motor which greatly influenced the design of BSA's A7, and therefore the A10. The early Gold Flash had a gearbox that bolted to the back of the engine. But in 54, Hopwood developed a swinging arm frame, and this would see a more conventional gearbox, which moved independently of the engine. To me, there's something very special about riding a 1950s old bike. It's a little bit like owning a time machine. Step on it, kick it up, and suddenly you're blasted back to the 1950s or 60s, zipping down the road, looking for mods to pick on. I may be exaggerating a little bit there, but you get the idea. It's just the way the bike makes you feel. The top end on these early Gold Flashes is all iron. Now, this may seem a little bit crude, and it does mean the bike runs a bit hot. But it also means that it absorbs some of that nasty vibration that you get from British Twins, and makes the engine a little bit more mechanically quiet too. And true enough, whilst there is some vibration, it's a great deal less than any of the Triumphs that we've owned previously. In fact, overall I'd say it was the smoothest British Twin I've ever ridden. It really is a joy to ride. The BSA's long-stroke motor may not give the ultimate performance that the Triumphs did in the day or Norlands, but it's a very flexible, easy-to-use engine. It pulls in almost any gear, and getting the bike to tug out of corners on an open throttle is truly addictive, and the sound is glorious. Through the twisties, the BSA frame is very good by the standards of its time, but the old-fashioned tyres that are fitted to this bike mean that I don't push my luck too much. The suspension was as good as it got at the time, but these days it feels rather bouncy and pretty crude. But it works well enough, and kind of adds to the enjoyment of the machine. As you might expect, the steering isn't exactly aggressive, but it is very stable, which is really what you want of a bike this age. You're not going to be chucking through the corners and racing your friends. It's just nice to potter along on your own sometimes and enjoy the lusty sound. The ergonomics of the bike is surprisingly good. The sitting position is really comfortable, although admittedly, once the bike is up to about 80, you feel like a human parachute. But then, it was designed at a time before motorways, so that's hardly surprising. Unlike its more sporty cousins, the machine has an auto advance and retard system, so you don't have to fiddle around with the timing. Generally the levers are easy to get your hands on and well placed, but the clutch is heavy, predictably, as is the brakes. You really do have to pull pretty hard on them to get them to stop. The old-fashioned weight distribution, however, means that the back brake contributes a great deal more to the stopping power than you would find on a more modern machine, which is quite helpful given how poor the front is. So applying plenty of pressure to the front and the back together will get the bike to stop. Well, eventually. The 4-speed transmission uses a down for up pattern and is overall, I'd say, pretty smooth. The electrical system uses a magneto to provide the spark at the rear of the engine and a dynamo at the front. The magneto is pretty reliable, I have to say, and works really well. The generator, unfortunately, is only 6 volt, so by modern standards the lighting is what can only be described as crap. The horn's surprisingly loud though. But other than that, there's nothing else to worry about, other than a brake light. There are very few switches to fiddle around with. And to be honest, I just don't take the bike out at night. The lights will be completely dazzled and overwhelmed by more modern cars. So it's just not worth the trouble. This is a bike for sunny days and quiet country roads. In its day, the Flash was considered less sporty and just not as plain sexy as the equivalent Triumphs, but the chassis was definitely better. And at the end of the day, this is a bike that could do 100 miles an hour, do a standing quarter in about 16 seconds, and could get 0 to 60 in just over 6 seconds. This doesn't sound like very quick today, but by comparison, a Morris Minor had a top speed of only 62 miles an hour. By those standards, the bike must have been unbelievably fast. On occasion, the A10 was used in competition, but its inlet manifold was cast integrally with the cylinder head on all models, even the late sporty models. This meant that it was very difficult to try and retrofit twin carburetors. So instead of a sporting bike, what you got was a lusty, reliable, friendly, fast touring bike, and one that provides a great deal of joy and dependability, by the standards of its time, of course. So all in all, what the BSA offers is a very practical classic. There's also great value for money, and a machine that I would heartily recommend to anybody. So once again, it remains for me to say, ride safe. Oh, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.